Olá, meus amigos, bem-vindos à programação Língua Portuguesa aqui no canal 49. É com muito gosto que estamos consigo para mais uma edição do programa Os Portugueses no Vale. E nesta edição, mais uma vez, vamos ter uma convidada e vamos falar, apesar de iremos falar em inglês, mas será sobre a nossa comunidade, porque o programa Os Portugueses no Vale, a celebrar praticamente em poucas semanas, aliás, o seu 30º ano de apresentação aqui no canal 49, portanto há 30 anos que o programa Os Portugueses no Vale está aqui neste canal e sempre o programa é dedicado à nossa comunidade ou então à nossa ligação comunidade Açores, comunidade de Portugal. Neste caso, é precisamente dedicado à nossa comunidade e às famílias, esta rica tradição das famílias portuguesas em terras da Califórnia e particularmente em terras do Vale de São Joaquim. Portanto, vamos passar para o idioma inglês, mas vamos continuar a falar, obviamente, sobre a presença portuguesa em terras da Califórnia e no fim do programa, daqui a 20 e poucos minutos, voltarei, portanto, para vos dar um resumo daquilo que falamos em português, muito breve, um resumo de mais ou menos 2 a 3 minutos. Vamos então passar para a língua inglesa, mas permaneçam com o canal 49. Este é o programa Os Portugueses no Vale. Welcome everyone, welcome to another edition of Os Portugueses no Vale, and welcome to our guests. Thank you so much for being here. We are honored that we have Kathy Mendes, and let me pronounce your last name right? Gulley.
Gulley.
Ah, I did it. I always have issues with names that are not Portuguese. I can pronounce Mendes, okay. So, Kathy, thank you so much for being here with us today. You have written a book that you were kind enough to gift me an edition of it, and I've been reading a little bit at a time. It is tell us about this project. So, first of all, welcome, and tell us how you began this quite extensive project of the legacy of A.F. and Maria C. Mendes, please.
Sure. Well, my family, we all grew up together on a dairy farm in Riverdale. We were all very close. My father had 5 brothers and sisters, and we were all living there together, and we grew up together, and we have common memories of experiences with our avu and our ava. Mm-hmm. And as we got older and moved away and would lose touch with each other, members of our family would marry outside the Portuguese community, and pretty soon we had Hawaiians coming in and Italians coming in. And all through my life, I had worked to have family gatherings where we could celebrate our family and our culture. And I would make up things like Mendes family trivia games where people got prizes, describe how Grandpa caught gophers and that kind of thing. And when I realized that the anniversary of my grandfather's arrival at Ellis Island was approaching in 2011.
So he came over in 1911.
He came in 1911, and I had researched. He came from the Azores, from Treseda.
Okay.
He was born in Santa Barbara, but was sent to an orphanage, and grew up in an orphanage in Angra, where he learned to play musical instruments. He learned a trade, and they prepared him to be a priest.
Right.
But we.
So he immigrated in 1911.
1911, July 23rd, 1911, and I knew that much.
How old was he?
He was 16, and he came with his widowed mother and his 3 brothers. Okay. And so I decided I was going to have a 100 Years in America party. And I talked to all of my cousins and my aunts and my uncles, and they were like, okay, yeah. Nobody was excited about it, even my dad.
But you were.
But I was. So I just kept saying, well, that's okay. I'm going to plan it, and they'll show up. So I worked real hard. I sent out letters and emails, and sure enough, the day of our event, we had about 175 people show up. At that time, some of us were connecting with cousins that we didn't even know we had. And we drew out a big family tree on the dining room table. And after that, I went to the Azores with my father in 2014. and he took me and showed me the places that are special to my family, where Grandma was born and Grandpa was born and where he was raised.
Your father, of course, was born here, right?
Right. My father was born here.
But he had been back.
He had been back. Okay. And so he knew all of these places very well. And that trip just sparked something in me. I always felt there was great value in our story, but there's great value in every family story. Every family has a story to tell. And when we got home from that trip, I started talking to my dad more and more about our family, and I was getting lots of information and more enthused, and then very unexpectedly, he died. So then I thought, I have 3 living aunts and 1 living uncle, and if they die before I get to them, our stories die with them. So I bothered them terribly, called them constantly, dropped by, and they would say, you know, there's a box of old pictures in the garage, and you know, you can go look for them. Well, I found amazing things. In those days, in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, newspapers were filled with valuable information. So I was able to find engagements, announcements, and stories about family weddings, and stories about family deaths. And I decided I was going to try to put all this together to share with my family. And I assumed I would get 15 or 16 pages. But as I continued my work, then a cousin would call and say, my mom says that you want boxes of all the old stuff, you know. And so so people would bring me more and more boxes. And it got to where I didn't know who any of these people were. Sure. So I scanned these photos, hundreds and hundreds, and I posted them on Facebook, where I have 1 friend on Facebook in Cheseda. So I posted them on Facebook. I tagged my 1 friend. So then all of her friends could see these pictures. And pretty soon there are comments appearing under these pictures. Who is this person that has this photo of my grandparents? They've been dead 50 years, and I've never seen this photo, and I want to know who she is and where she got it. Well, I said, I must be your cousin.
Right.
I must be your relative. So through the course of that, then, I was able to identify people in photographs that had nothing written on the back. And then it got to where I had heard names over the years like California Joe or Tia Kinda, and I didn't know who they were. Well, it got to where I could pull a picture out of it. Oh, this is California Joe. Here, I recognize him from... And I came to feel like I really knew all of them. So...
And how about the stories? Because the book has a lot of pictures, as you mentioned. You know, it has a lot of documentation. And like you said, newspapers then were really a treasure. Today, it's a different world. And a lot of documents. But there's a story behind, you know, everything that's in the book. Were these stories collected from your aunts and uncles and from your...
Many of them.
From your dad?
Many of them were stories that my dad had told to me over the years. And I invited my cousins several times to my house. I made kovsh or sopish and asked them, just picked their brain.
Food will bribe them, right?
That's right. What are your memories of Vava? What are your memories of Vava? And they would share stories, and those family gatherings ended up being so much fun because it reminded us of how connected we were growing up and how we're really all too busy these days. Sure. We need to do this more often. But so I emailed everybody, you know, send me what you have, send me what you know. And some of my favorite stories, my cousin Mary Alice, when she was a little girl, we would always get dressed for Sunday Mass. And, you know, we always wore the hat and all dressed up for church, and we would stop at Ovo and Ava's house to get a kiss before we went to Mass. And then one day, Mary Alice said, how come they don't just go to Mass and see us at Mass? And so my cousin Mary Alice told me the story. She asked my grandfather, Avo, how come I have to come and see you before church and then I don't see you in church? And he said, because I'm not going to go pay $1 for the same show I saw last week.
That's a Portuguese man. That's a good thing.
And, so these stories then became part of the book.
Yeah.
And my nephew and godchild, Joey Quello, we were discussing this book at one time at a family party, and someone asked me, how long did it take you to write this book?
Right.
And I answered truthfully that it was 11 months from beginning to end. I started gathering pictures, scanning them, posting them, and gathering stories and considering the layout, and I got it all done in 11 months. And my nephew, godchild, said, Madringa, you've been working on this book your whole life. You ask people questions all the time. You're forever wanting to know about people. So when none of us know who is Tia Lena, I know who Tia Lena is because I've talked to her and that kind of thing.
And so, it's been kind of a lifelong project, but it took 11 months from the moment you decided I want to publish this.
Right, and I did all the layout myself. I did all the typing. I laid it. It was completely ready, just like this, except it had to be printed.
Correct.
Now, I knew no publisher wants to publish a book that might sell 60 copies to the Mendes family. And but I knew it would be expensive to take it to be printed. But I also knew we're running out of time.
Right.
And I had lost my mother and then my father, and then 2 of the aunts that helped me are now gone, and my Uncle Tony is gone. And I decided that I didn't care what it cost me or what my time value was. This was something I had to give to my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, my great-nieces and nephews, and anybody in the family that was interested. I had no idea. I ordered 100 copies, and I thought I could be sitting on a dozen boxes of books for the rest of my life. But I hosted a family reunion on my grandparents' 100th wedding anniversary. Again, a packed house. The response was overwhelming. Everyone wanted a copy, so I only have 6 left.
Wow, fantastic.
I had it printed in Hanford, but now I understand there are places that you can create your book, and there is a printer that will print copies as needed.
Right.
So what I'm hoping is to inspire others who might still have a great aunt or an ava alive, or someone who knew them, who can share stories with them. And before someone dies and the family comes through and sees pictures, they have no idea who they are. You know what? We don't know these people. Let's throw them away. Get them out. Get them out and go through. Someone will recognize someone.
Correct.
And from there you can go to the next and the next. And it's important to do that now because my father was first generation born here, and of course I'm second generation. So I and my peer group, my sibling, my cousins, we know the story, but we're getting older, we're forgetting, and I thought if we don't tell these kids this story now, it will be gone. And as we said, they're marrying into different nationalities, and that's great because they enrich.
Sure.
They enrich our family.
It
makes it wonderful.
That's what America's all about.
But we don't want them to forget and lose sight of the fact that this man grew up in an orphanage with his brother and had to leave his home and didn't want to be a priest, but was sent off to study to be a priest. And then in 1910, there was a revolution, and he fled, got his mother and his 3 brothers, and brought them to the United States. Well, because he was raised in an orphanage, he had an advantage very few had. He had almost the equivalent of a college education. Mm-hmm. He spoke 5 languages. He could play any musical instrument. And so the other little Portuguese dairymen around, they couldn't understand contracts, so he could help them with that. You know, he was an asset to the community and to our family.
And he came to Riverdale area?
He came originally to Stratford, mm-hmm. and his mother, the widow, mm-hmm. arrived and married her deceased husband's brother, which I think that happens a lot, yes. But she died in 1955, so I never met her. Maria dos Milagres, her name is amazing to me, Mary of Miracles. Yes. And so I never met her. My grandmother who came...
So they met here.
They met
Grandpa
here.
Grandpa came obviously at 16. And
right, in 1911.
With his family, with his mom and his brother.
She came...
Was she an immigrant as well?
Yes.
Okay.
As soon as she turned 16, her family allowed her to leave Ribeirinha, mm-hmm. and she came to live with an uncle and was hoping to get work as a domestic. She arrived the 1st of October, 1917. Well, they met, and within 6 weeks of her arrival, they married at St. Peter's Church in Lemoore. Mm-hmm. But, you know, she was the only girl in the family, and she was the bravest one. She came first, and she came by herself.
Did her brothers came later?
One or two of her brothers eventually came,
okay.
and lived
and
near
they
us.
never went back?
My ava never went back. Okay. But my ava, mm-hmm. he had a granddaughter named Joyce, who married a wonderful man named Alvin Graves.
Oh, of course. Okay. Now I had read about that.
Okay,
yes.
So my grandfather had been gone away 62 years, and Al was studying mm-hmm. Portuguese in America. And he said, I'll make you a deal. If you will travel with me to the Azores and show me your life there, I will carry your luggage. And so Joyce and Al and my ava and his brother John, that was also raised in the orphanage, they went together in 1972.
Oh, fantastic.
And I have photos in this book of that trip, because I can only imagine leaving a place thinking you'd never hear those voices again or see those faces again, to be reunited with people.
Sure, 1972, and he had come over in 1911. So we're talking about 61 years later.
And he had, a wonderful, wonderful time.
Did he enjoy? I was going to ask that.
He had a lovely time, and I'm so thankful to Al, mm-hmm. that Al Graves, that he created this opportunity for my grandpa to go back. But Grandma never did get to go back, although when her father died, they sent for her mother to come, and she lived the rest of her life here in Riverdale on the farm. And getting to know these people and hearing stories about their lives and their heartache and, losing a child or losing a spouse early. And, I felt like I've really come to know all of them, and I can relate to them. And my kids are laughing at me now because I lived in Riverdale my entire life. And in fact, I lived in the house I grew up in. And we have now sold all of our property, and there was no reason for me to stay there. My sons and my grandsons and my nephews, they're all in Fresno, and our doctors are in Fresno.
Right.
And so the logical thing to do would be to move to Fresno. And it was almost traumatic for me. And my son was teasing me, and I said, I lived in the same village my whole life with all the same people. And then I went away to the big world, on my own at 60 years old. But I could kind of relate that in a way, you know, I was leaving what I knew. It wasn't a place where I belonged anymore.
Correct.
And
now imagine leaving that place at 16.
No, I can't.
And not knowing where you're going. And you'd been to Fresno a couple of times in your life, I'm sure, from Riverdale. But never, and traveling across a continent, a sea and a continent. You know, I don't like to say, well, young people don't have the courage that older people, that generation had, but and there are courage, and courage is different at different times of society. However, it took a lot of courage.
Right.
It took a lot of courage for your grandfather and for your grandmother at 16, and all of our viewers are grandparents.
And for the family that got left behind, had to be traumatic.
Yeah, because you never knew when you were going to get the next letter.
And they said it would take weeks and weeks and weeks. You could write a letter saying, you know, someone died.
And at that time, your grandfather was one of the few that knew how to read or write.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if he wrote a letter to someone there that he treasured, that person had to find someone who could read or write and translate it. It's not the same thing as, you know, reading your sons or your cousins' own words.
True.
So it's very dramatic that we forget in today's world, but very dramatic.
Years ago, you know, my father always said, when we went to school, we didn't want to stand out as the outsiders.
Correct.
We wanted to be just like the American kids.
Correct.
And so that's kind of how we were raised, although they would say to us, fecha a luz, abra a porta. They would speak to us a little bit. Yeah.
You can be quiet, call me Khaled, when you told them you didn't like the food. We actually, in our Portuguese club, when I was teaching in high school, we had a Portuguese club called SOPAS, Society of Portuguese-American Students, and we published a little cookbook, and we call it exactly that. Call me Khaled, because that's something the kids say they remember from their grandparents when they would say, oh, I don't like this food that much. No, call me Khaled, you know, eat and be quiet. So, you know, you knew some of those made-up phrases.
Right.
But not the language itself.
But once my dad took me to the Azores, I thought, you know, why did I not know all of this before?
Now, did your dad speak Portuguese?
My dad speaks Portuguese, and in fact, on his deathbed, he was speaking Portuguese. He was calling for his mother in Portuguese, and so that was his native, you know, tongue.
So, although he was born here, he was raised speaking Portuguese with his mom and dad.
Right, he was. And it's just, I'm so proud of these people.
Correct.
I'm so proud of these people. And if you look at our family now, I have marked it. You know, not that any of us are famous or ever will be famous, but...
Well, the Mendes family in Riverdale is famous. Everybody knows the Mendes in Riverdale.
But,
and not just in Riverdale, but around the valley.
Well, I hope they will after they, you know, hear more about our family. My family story is no different than any other immigrant family story.
It's always
a story. It's always the same. For example, in our family, there were 4 brothers: Jose, Antoine, João, and Francisco. Okay, so they come to America and they Americanize their names. So each one of these boys had a son named after John. So it was John Mendes, John Mendes, John Mendes, John Mendes. And then each one of those kids had, so pretty soon there were lots of John Mendeses. So there are pictures in my book that say from left to right, John Mendes, John Mendes, John Mendes, John Mendes, you know, because, and it's same with John Quello, you know.
Right. Yeah, I would use the same names. So those are some of the most popular Portuguese names, José, João, you know, et cetera. Yeah. Fantastic.
In fact, one picture of 4 men, I had no idea who they were. I posted it, and I said, who can name these men? Well, my Dutch friend thought she was going to be real funny, and she said, oh, that's João and Jose and Manuel and Francisco.
And they probably
And that's what their names were. So, but you know, in my family, we're involved in all different kinds of occupations. My cousin Buddy Mendes is the Fresno County supervisor.
Yes.
My cousin's son has been the mayor of Hampford. We have business owners, crop scientists, pest control advisors, dairy builders. We have a priest. We have people involved in international sales. So our family has grown and changed, and it's exactly what our grandpa hoped for, that they weren't milking cows 2 times a day 100 years later.
Correct.
And he believed in education, and he and she gave us the best gift, the idea that we were to work hard and go to school, and I'm forever grateful. And I want to spend the rest of my life honoring them. And if anybody, anywhere, would like to try to write a family book, I would love to show them how to do it.
Well, Kathy, thanks so much. Our time is up. This was a fascinating conversation. Congratulations on the book. Congratulations to the Mendes family. And you truly have honored, I believe, your grandparents.
I hope so.
Thank you so much.
So.
E assim, meus amigos, estivemos a conversar com a senhora Kathy Mendes Gulley, que é, portanto, a autora deste livro, em que falamos em inglês sobre a família. E muito importante, de facto, como disse a senhora Kathy, ter a presença das nossas famílias, documentar isto, se não num livro grande como este, que é grande e bonito, mas também até pode ser em coleção de jornais ou em coleção de fotografias, mas fazer algo para os vossos filhos, para os vossos netos, para os vossos bisnetos. As histórias, infelizmente, muitas vezes vão com os nossos pais ou os nossos avós para a cova. Portanto, ficam 6 pés debaixo da cova. E é triste que essas histórias não permaneçam de geração para geração e que elas só ficarão, portanto, de geração para geração se nós tivermos um tempo não só de as contar, mas também de as escrever e imprimi-las e passá-las para as nossas famílias, para os nossos amigos. Muito obrigado mais uma vez pela vossa companhia. Foi o programa Os Portugueses no Vale a celebrar 30 anos ao serviço da comunidade de língua e cultura portuguesas aqui no centro da Califórnia. Hoje conversamos em inglês, nosso programa uma vez em inglês, outra vez em português, porque a nossa história é uma história multigeracional, ou seja, uma história de imigrantes, daqueles que aqui estão e que vieram há 25, 30, 40, 50 anos, como no meu caso, e também daqueles, como a senhora Kathy, com quem conversamos, que foram os seus avós ou os seus bisavós, que vieram, portanto, dos Açores, do arquipélago dos Açores, de Portugal, para esta terra da Califórnia. Mas todos eles, quer aqueles que são netos de imigrantes, ou os imigrantes como eu, é uma história de imigração, e aqui estamos para contá-la. Um abraço e até sempre no programa Os Portugueses no Vale, 3 vezes por semana, convosco, aqui no canal 49.